All right, thank you very much. Kevin Franco, I'm part of the Extinction Event number 3, but currently working with Firebrand Technologies. We develop software for publishers, and today I'm going to provide a report on metadata. So, a little word on discovery first. I travel to Santiago, Chile quite a bit, and the bookstores there are quite fascinating. There's many of them. And when you go into the stores, they're very niche. They're very targeted. So you go into a bookstore. Typically here, when we walk into a bookstore, we can choose from any variety of books. And in Chile, they're very unique. So you go into one store, and it's just fantasy books. You go into another store, and it's just romance. And another store, like they're all individually categorized, which is really cool. But what's interesting about it is that the proprietor or the people that work there, they're intimately aware of every book that's on the shelf, and when you go in to explain what you want, they can connect you to the book you're looking for. And from a discovery standpoint, that's an amazing piece, that the proprietor has all this information of how they can connect you to the right book. And that's what metadata is supposed to do in the digital world. And I'm just going to put this up here. Because in the digital world, where a lot of discovery is happening, there's a little bit more than just the few hundred books that the proprietor is dealing with. There's several other categories and SKUs. This quote here was at the time, 2015, 46 million SKUs they're looking after. And they need to be able to connect the people on their website very quickly to the content they're looking for. And this is why it's so important. So before I get going, I really want to get on the same page with everybody, because everybody has a different view in the room of how we look at metadata, how we look at books, how we look at different terms, and I just want to kind of set the table so we're looking at it from the same view. And I apologize, I'm kind of nervous, first time talking in a long time. But we're talking about trade books primarily today. When I mentioned backlist, everybody views backlist a little bit differently, I'm sure. So today we're just going to talk about books that are published over 1 year ago and not part of any current marketing cycles. When I reference books, or I'll use the word titles, it references all, print and e. Marketing, really targeting activities targeted towards retail or happening within retail. And in metadata, when I use that word, if I use that word, I don't like to use that word because the eyes gloss over. Except Dad's very excited about this. We're really talking about a small subset, this is more of a marketing-driven exercise in what I'm going to show you. And so we're going to focus on the fields within Onyx, or that small subset that are pertinent to marketing. So when we look at search and discovery, online is driven not by new releases, but by search. So that's why we've seen the backlist grow so rapidly, not rapidly, but grow so steadily in the last number of years, along with a few other reasons. When we look at brick and mortar, it's about algorithms. That's really what's driving discovery. And we've got different ways of reaching consumers nowadays. And the thing that we have in our industry that's unique and an opportunity is that we have a standardized method of sending product information to market. There's no other industries that I can find that are using a similar system as we have with Onyx. And publishers are squandering this opportunity. And I have receipts, so I don't say that loosely. I will show you that publishers have been largely ignoring discussions and tips and helpful advice on metadata for, I put 10 years, but we all know that it's more than 10 years. The pandemic provided a catalyst, a major shift to online sales. Retail platform has become critical to sales and discovery. And when you start looking at how SEO works for web, we need to start looking at how book exposure optimization, or some sort of SEO for books, how that works with the online retail platforms. So the M word, metadata. It's evolved in our careers. It's evolved from different use to becoming a very critical marketing tool. And it really serves two purposes in marketing, which is to find and sell books. A lot of discussion has happened around completeness of metadata and fixing it. But what does that really mean? There's over 200 fields. Which ones do we start with? There's so many, that's a big task. So we're really just going to focus on the ones pertinent to marketing at this time. So, and I typically refer to it as product information. So the rest of the world talks about product information when they're trying to sell things online, and those are the things that they're actively enhancing to create more sales. And essentially it is metadata, but I like product information and the approach. So product information really does two things. It drives discovery and it drives sales conversion. Book exposure optimization is all around using SEO tactics to drive retail search. And CRO, or the conversion rate optimization, is around making the changes to the metadata that is visible to the consumers that helps them and influences their decision to buy. And what I've seen is that publishers are not applying any kind of lean methodology to understanding this information as it goes to market, and there's a lot of reasons why. It's a lot of work. So if we look at BEO, it's really driven around winning the search, and that's the quantitative metadata that we send out, and it's what the search engines see. If we look at conversion rate optimization, it's around what wins the sale, and it's qualitative metadata, and it's what the customers see. And then in between, so there's these four main categories, which is keywords, BISAC, description, autobiography, but then there's a bunch of other kind of in-between areas that fall under both sides. But if we think about the tactic or the approach, it's really about focusing on that discovery piece first, and you're talking to the algorithm. That's your audience. And the second part is to target the audience with conversion rate optimization, and that's really about the things that influence the sale. So the problem is, and this is why publishers, they're not necessarily ignoring, but it's a big deal. It's a quantity problem. There's just so much there. There's not a lot of budget to go after backlist titles exclusively. And then if so, which ones? Where do you start? How do you prioritize? How do you get this moving, right? So this is actually something that I've been working on for the last year, is trying to build tools that can help publishers do this. And in doing this, we've developed some tools that can analyze a lot of data very quickly. And so we processed over 3.3 million titles from over 11,000 sources. And I'm going to share with you our findings on what the metadata looks like from a very large sample size. Okay. So we're not going to do all of the metadata. There's over 200 fields in Onyx, of course, so we're going to focus on some of the key ones. So some of them prevent you from selling at all. Two of the fields, as I showed you, are critical to discovery. Two of the fields are critical to sales conversion. Of course, all the fields are useful. Everybody's represented in the Onyx fields, but they're for different purposes. And then if we're looking at it through the marketing lens, there's really a subset of the metadata that's more important than others. So in the 3.3 million titles, 12,000 titles were missing a price, 23,000 titles missing a pub date, and 42 did not have a title. Now, some of these stats are kind of amusing, and there's reasons, there's explanations, right? And well, I'm assuming here, and I'm talking to a room that probably knows a lot more about metadata than I do, and I'm just reporting the findings. But when we look at these, I look at that and I assume, well, they're probably publishers that don't have a pub date yet, or they're kind of pushing it so that it doesn't go on the store and whatnot. So there's always explanations to all these weird things. There are a couple that I will ask the audience for some explanation on, though. But if we look at how the distribution of these 3 million titles are by decade, this is how it falls. And so 700,000 from the 2000s, 1.7 million from the 2010s, and then the current numbers this year. And what we have here is the front list, there's the back list, a little nod to the Internet Archive, in the way back list, and then we've got the extreme front list. And so these titles here, there's 11,000 titles, and I think for the for the same reason that these are kind of not pub yet, so they put some date way in the future, but it's kind of interesting to see. If we split it up between nonfiction and fiction, this is kind of interesting, especially when we look at the disparity between the two in the current years versus years previous. There's a big difference there, and I just sharing this because it's interesting. I have no idea why. I could probably make some assumptions, but there's 10 books that are scheduled for 99.90, the 99.90s, because they're in different years. But they're all nonfiction, and I really want to know what these books are about. So, when we look at contributors, there's 2.3 million titles with one contributor, 700,000 with two contributors. And this is pretty much what I would expect, and I'm sure that that's what you're expecting. But there's 3 titles with 112 contributors, 1 title with 177 contributors. Like, Kobo, what does this look like on your store? Like, it's interesting. It's and there's 19,000 titles with 0 contributors. And as I said, there's always a rationale or a reason. And there's some publishers that have calendars, right? So calendar would be one reason that could have no contributors. So it's not singling out somebody that forgot they had authors. So some of the things that we have missing in action. Almost 500,000 books are missing the page count. 2.6 million are missing an age range. 1 million missing an audience code. 2.9 million missing dimensions, which I will point out. I just bought a book online and it arrived and it was much smaller than I was expecting. And the format, 1.5 million. So when we're talking about conversion rate optimization, what does that mean to the customer when the format's not listed or the size isn't there? Some of those key details that convert that from looking at the page to hitting the buy button. So there's a lot of room to improve. BISAC categories. All right, so 3 million, over 3 million have BISAC categories. Great. There's 200,000 that do not. And 300,000 have generic BISAC codes, which are as effective as not having a BISAC code. So it's 500,000 books that are essentially, if you think about a physical store, they're being shipped to the back room and they're sitting in a box and they'll never hit the sales floor until they have some sort of category attached to them. If we look at the distribution of BISAC codes, there's 208,000 with 0, 2.7 million with 1, and so on. You can read the rest of these. But 300,000 have a generic BISAC code as their only category. This is bad. So BISG, assigning more than 4 to 5 categories would be unusual. I showed some of these numbers a month ago, and the number has actually improved by 6,000, which is interesting. It wasn't from the people that I talked to, but it's just the market is continuously evolving, so I thought I'd share that. Continuing with the distribution of BISAC codes, 3,000 titles with 6 BISAC codes, 1,400 with 7, and so on. 20 titles with 15 BISAC codes. Has anyone selected BISAC codes? This is when you get over like 3 or 4, it starts to get more complex, right? So 74 titles with over 16 BISAC codes and 1 title with 40 BISAC codes. So I was like, are we covering our bases? We're going to be in every search. It's crazy. All right, keywords. 41% of titles sent to market. So this is publishers saying, I'm putting this in the store and I want to sell it. And they're not including keywords, 41%. If we look older than 10 years, any of the titles, it's 54%, 35% 10 years and newer, 36% fiction, 41% nonfiction. So this is how those numbers fall. And yeah, keywords, crazy. Here's how the distribution of keywords is. On the side, we've got like 0 keywords, 1 to 25 keywords, 26 to 50, and you can figure the rest. The Nielsen study in 2020 says that books with keywords sell 140% more copies. Now, I don't know if that means 1 keyword or 2, but it means some, right? Yet there's still a lot of publishers that elect for 0, and some is better than none. So we've got a lot of work, so much work to be done here. And if we look at books older than 10 years, look at this. Like, this is a huge opportunity for backlist sales, and publishers are leaving money on the table by not putting this information into the books. Newer than 10 years, like, publishers know that this is important, and there's still, look at that column at the bottom with 0 titles with no keywords. Anyways, fiction, this one is very important to put those keywords in at the time of creation. That's when you have access to the editors. That's when you have access to the people that know about the book. It's much harder to add keywords to fiction later in life. Nonfiction, interesting that they, in the 51 to 75 and above categories, they have 278% more keywords than fiction. Author bios, how about this? All titles sent to market. Now, some publishers actively go in and adjust that manually after the fact, but why? Oops, was that a joke? Yeah, there's my joke. Okay. I don't want to gloss over the jokes, but in the author bios, when we're looking at older than 10 years, 54% without a bio, 10 years and newer, so this is when we should know better, and fiction and nonfiction. That's how the distribution of author bios is. Now, when we look at book descriptions, this is really interesting because 1 in 10 books doesn't have a book description. How bad is that? And a book description is probably one of the most important pieces in that sales conversion, right? We talk about discovery and then we talk about sales conversion, and the description is infinitely important to this. So if we look at missing descriptions in all books, it's 1 in 10. In books 10 years and older, like backlist, it's 1 in 5. Newer books, we're showing this is a promising number. This is good. Fiction 1 in 10, and nonfiction about 1 in 10. So again, huge opportunity in the backlist for publishers. So 187,000 titles have descriptions with fewer than 280 characters. In other words, 5% of titles have descriptions that are shorter than a tweet. And as I said, this good description is the difference between a glance view and a sale. So good news is, in analyzing 3.3 million titles, we got to see a lot of insight. Now, obviously, we went a lot deeper in a lot of these areas, but publishers are getting better at including the metadata in newer titles as they're coming out. We found there's a huge opportunity in backlist sales for publishers, and it's just like there's so much opportunity here, and I can't convey enough how important it is that this is a direct line to discovery and sales for publishers, and it's sitting there waiting to be done. So we've also learned that we can pinpoint these discovery issues very quickly. We've learned that we can identify sales conversion issues very quickly. There's massive discrepancies in data. Remember I said we had 11,000 entries. We've figured that to be around 9,000 publishers. So, but there's multiple publishers from the same company sending data from different things using different things. So obviously we have one ISBN is one ISBN, but it's kind of crazy, and you got to wonder which data is being overridden in which retailers. Anyways, this stuff can't be solved manually. It's just too big. It needs to be done by some technology to automate some of these processes, and it can be fixed, and we're working on that. At the end of the day, it comes down to squeezing more juice, ensuring that information that we send to market doesn't erode, because it erodes over time. It gets stale, it gets old, and keeping it fresh in market is super important. So this is what I'm working on. I'm working on developing these types of tools, helping publishers try and make metadata changes at scale. That's the goal. So we're automating a lot of these pieces right now, and this has already begun. So my last numbers are this that I want to share with you today. And thank you very much for the metadata talk.